So the stone walls of Fort Carillon that the French originally built, they wouldn't have used the term synergy, but they had a really good synergy. So the engineer said, we need to make a ditch all the way around the fort. And by the way, the top 2 feet is soil, and the remaining 12 feet's bedrock. So very quickly, in order to make the ditch to surround the fort on the north and west side, they now had enough stone to build whatever they want. And in fact, so the barracks inside of the fort were originally done in wood. So from 1756 right up to the summer of 1757, you got these nice timber frame barracks. By the end of that summer, they have so much stone from blasting out the ditch that they're saying, you know, maybe fieldstone would look pretty good in here. And they actually tear down the barracks, rebuild them in stone, and the timbers that they'd used to make the barracks, they used those to build the hospital, which was further out on the peninsula. They recycled it. They're very conscientious that way. Now, speaking of Frenchmen, there's this over here, ahead of us to our right there. You see there what's now the Fort View Inn, the restaurant today. It's got the green shingles and the 2 brick chimneys there. Just out ahead of that is Montcalm Landing. So Montcalm Landing, beyond the name, has nothing to do with the actual French Marquis de Montcalm. He did nothing there, to my knowledge. It's just a name. But, so imagine in 1874, on that point, there was a combination steamboat dock and railroad station. So imagine you go ahead and you put an entire railroad station all the way out into the lake. And in fact, if you look at our navigation chart here, you guys see this half circle? Okay, that half circle of navigational obstacles today, that's the pilings from the posts that held up the railroad tracks. And the idea was that this would be so convenient you could get out of your steamboat, hop onto your train makes a little loop, takes you around Mount Defiance up to Lake George, that this would transform overnight the traditional tourist route, what was called the Grand Northern Tour, which typically, and up to that point had been, you would go up the Hudson, you'd go down Lake George, then you'd come onto Lake Champlain, continue to Burlington, make the big loop out to Niagara and back. This was the actual railroad station steamboat dock wasn't that successful. It only lasted about 40 years, but Montcalm Landing was still in use right up through the 1950s. Not only as a boat dock and even steamboat dock right up until 55, this was also a ferry crossing. So imagine you could go from the Montcalm Landing over to what was the Orwell ferry. It's now Buoy 39 Marina. And you can see how conveniently that gentle slope, which would have taken you onto your ferry, is now a great place to launch your boat. To the south of us, and as we round the turn here, you can just start to see it past us. So if you look a little bit ahead of us to the left, you can see the sailboat mast sticking up in the distance. Okay, those sailboat masts right there, that's Chipman Point Marina. That was another ferry crossing. So you go from Chipman Point over to Wright's Ferry in Putnam, New York. You can still find Wright's Ferry because you look for Wright's Ferry Road in Putnam. It's pretty easy that way. That's another ferry. And then the one ferry, which should be in operation anytime now, not that that's a sore subject for residents of Shoreham. That ferry takes you from Larrabee's Point over to Ticonderoga. And imagine, right up through the 1970s, there were 22 different ferries across Lake Champlain. Now I think there's that one when it comes back. And then the ones up between Grand Isle, Port Henry, and Port Kent and all those. But imagine that was at a time when the lake, rather than being something that separated people, was actually what connected people together. That was at a time that there was a whole community lining the lake, and their kind of division wasn't between New York and Vermont, it was between living along the lake and not living along the lake. Yes. Yes. And even when we change directions, it still remains the same.